And we've got matching Books of Blood red lipstick, haven't we?
Oh, yes, yes. Got to get in that Halloween spirit.
Yeah, there you go.
Hey, it's Kristen, and today we are chatting with the cast and creatives of Hulu's new horror anthology film, Books of Blood. Enjoy our conversation. I'd love to start with you, Clive,
Sure.
and just find out a little bit more about where the idea for Books of Blood came from originally.
The idea of doing a collection of short stories in which no two stories resemble any other story. In other words, they're all fresh, hopefully fresh ideas, certainly fresh to me, and that none of them would be alike was something I had in my head for a long time. I guess it's one of the strengths of short story collections is that you can keep surprising people, that every time, I don't know, something like 30 stories in the 6 Books of Blood, if you open it at any page, it's going to be different from any other page in a significant way. Some of the stories are sexy. Some of the stories are very, very bloody. Some of the stories are just twisted. Some of the stories don't even have a few jokes in them. But the whole point is that it always should be surprising. It always should be fresh.
Now, for you, Brannon, what was it about this collection of books that made you want to adapt them? And also, how did you choose which ones you wanted to focus on?
I'm just a fan of Clive's, and I'm a fan, first and foremost, a fan of his work, a fan of him as a person. And these books blew my mind when they came out. Here was a guy who released 6 volumes of stories, like the Beatles releasing their albums on the same day. Like, what? How did this happen? Where did this guy come from? Over the years, in the back of my mind, I thought, somehow someone one day is going to do an anthological piece based on the Books of Blood. And as anthology TV, thanks to Black Mirror, the brilliant Black Mirror, started to emerge, it became clear that there was a place for this possibly. And I was introduced to Clive, and Clive, thank goodness, was willing to consider the possibility. And we started working together in earnest. And how did we choose the stories? The Book of Blood, the first story in the first volume had to be in there because it's the origin story of the Book of Blood. And Clive had other ideas too. I mean, imagine as a fan sitting one-on-one with Clive Barker, and he says, "Oh, there are some stories that you haven't heard of that I have."
That was fun for me because there have been, over the years, these stories accruing in my head, and I really had nobody to tell them to. And along comes Brannon, and I say to Brannon, "Hey, I've got some other stories. Maybe we should be thinking about those too." And he said, "Bring them on."
I mean, you guys also have such great chemistry and you really play off of each other so well. What was it like working together?
Rafi's an utter pleasure to work with. I would do any job with him anytime. He takes it very seriously. He'd allow me to knock on his hotel door in the evening saying, "Please run lines with me," and not see me as just a needy actress. He made me laugh and he made the experience fun. And considering he had to be in such an uncomfortable costume for so many hours, he handled it like a pro. And I fed him Snickers because that made him smile.
She did. I just got very lucky. It makes life and work it makes it worth it when you're working with someone you care about and you have a connection with and you just appreciate, and Anna is fucking good at what she does, and that made me better. And that's just the bottom line.
Did you guys have a favorite scene to film together?
It was the scene where I was drunk and that I fell off the wagon, and it was it was just such a pleasure to film because we were allowed to be physical and get into it. And as Anna said, it was a challenge in a way that some scenes weren't, and they're a little more seamless, and just trying to work out the mechanics of that. And we were allowed to make it our own, and we weren't given too many constraints. And so if me and Anna came in with some suggestions as to where we should be and what we should do and how we want to interact, we were given that freedom. And it was just great to do that scene.
I'd agreed. It was choreographed, and I got to see Rafi's other skill. You're amazing physically. What's it called? You can do all that.
Parkour and shit.
Parkour. So I was like, "Come on, then let's see it." And he did, and he's like, "Just really hit me." I was like, "No, I might hurt you." Like, right. But we did, and it was nice. It was dancing together. I think when a scene really flows, it is very much like waltzing or doing the tango, because you vibe off each other and you get a rhythm. And that was the scene where we had the opportunity to do that.
What I find really fascinating about this story is that it's an anthology, but they also all kind of weave into each other. I love stories like that because you're kind of like, whoa, that one little thing that happened very briefly in the very beginning kind of connects to what happens at the end. And that's so exciting to see. So how did you decide how you were going to weave these three stories together?
It's a great question. And as fans of the subgenre of anthological films, most of which are horror films, some are better than others. So what do? You look at the best. And one of the best anthology films ever made is Pulp Fiction. And it's not a horror movie, though it has horror in it for sure. It really deftly told individual stories that cross-pollinated in just the right way. And so we kind of aspired to get that vibe to it, plus our own twist on it anyway, and make it a satisfying experience as a whole.
It's interesting that you've been the first one of the people we talked to this morning who actually identified the structural elegance of what Brannon did. And I thank you for that, because
thank you.
You are literally the first person who saw this interweaving of this subtle interweaving, which he achieves so brilliantly. Because even I, as seeing it for the first time, I had the pleasure of being surprised. Not just by the blood and the gore and all the intense stuff, but also by the subtle things you just said. And that's pretty rare. It's pretty rare because it's very difficult to do. It's wonderful to see. I've seen the picture 3 times now, and each time I see it, I find some other Easter egg which I hadn't noticed.
And you already mentioned the costume that Rafi has to wear. What was that like, being in this really intense makeup?
For me, I mean, it was brutal. Obviously, it was necessary to the story, but it was 7 hours of makeup in the morning. It was a latex suit, right? As Anna said, I would fall asleep and then she would feed me Snickers. So it was fucked, but at least I had that. I just, it was one of those necessary things, but I don't ever want to put that makeup on, because it was a nightmare. However, the way it looked, it was everything. And so, I was just thrilled. I mean, the makeup team were the coolest guys, and they've done the biggest jobs in the world. So I got lucky. They were very patient with my grumpiness.
For me, the extent of my makeup, was remembering the shade of MAC colour that I used to wear in the 90s, because I'm a bit of a 90s girl. So it was a bit of a shock when they said we're doing a period piece. And what was the colour I used to wear in the 90s? It was Verve. And they went, oh yes. And I said, do they still make that colour? So that was about the extent of makeup for me. And using dry shampoo to make me grey at the end, we found that was a really good trick. So anyone out there for Halloween wanting to age themselves up, I would go for the dry shampoo. And we've got matching Books of Blood red lipstick, haven't we?
Oh, yes. Got to get in that Halloween spirit.
Yeah, there you go.
Now, something that I thought was really interesting about your guys' roles was that you really dive into sort of these like otherworldly ideas and like, are they real? Are they fake? Could you maybe tell us a little bit about what that was like, diving into those themes?
Well, I think that's the aim, isn't it, with psychological thrillers, is to read them in as much truth as one possibly can. And I think rather than all the blood, guts and gore, I think if you play it, like Rafi said, as a straight drama, you're going to hook the audience in and have them believe more, much in the vein of, things like The Ring as opposed to Nightmare on Elm Street or Blair Witch Project. They're frightening because it could possibly happen.
My character is this kind of described as this kind of like otherworldly, ethereal creature, and I've always looked at it as no. In my case, that doesn't exist. He's preying on her and her beliefs, but the truth is he's incredibly in tune. And so, at that point, there are some people who are just kind of very in tune. They don't have a sixth sense, but maybe a fifth. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's where I was at with that, and hopefully pulled it off.
Trying to figure out how to create that uncertainty for the audience was like the biggest challenge, but also making sense of all of it, and her journey, and giving the audience a reason to want want to keep her safe, I think was really important. And just to feel sort of that conflict early on within herself was really important. And then, certainly once you find out what's happened to her at school and you find out sort of these other elements of her that make sense of everything, tying all of those things in was definitely challenging, but again, a part of the appeal. I guess sort of the underlying feeling for Jenna is just like this idea that she's trying to escape all of these circumstances, whether it be an unstable family situation or her dissatisfaction in school. But what you ultimately realize is that she's just trying to escape her own mind and is having a difficult time living within herself. And I think that Jenna sort of represents the darkest parts of ourselves, and she's not able to find the light, and she has no real coping skills. And as humans, we can be very resilient, but for Jenna, she sort of finds peace in this idea that for her, that's not an option.
The ending was a wild ride that I don't think a lot of people would expect, but you can tell that there's really like this emotional depth to this story, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
You could have ended the film on any number of ways, but we chose to end the movie on the story that we ended it on because it had the most emotional impact.
It's also the most perverse. We are taking people into not the conventional, but worlds of television horror. What we were always determined to do was do what the Books of Blood do, which is stay away from the cliches, stay away from werewolves, vampires, etc. And I think that's been beautifully achieved, and it gives us a matrix, a way to design a model for the next pictures, which we hopefully do together. There's a lot more Books of Blood to tell. Everybody is a book of blood. Wherever we're opened, we're read.
Yeah.
Wow.
Is that kind of where the title came from, that idea?
That's what lies under the title, because obviously it's a pun on red. Everybody is a book of blood. Wherever we're opened, we're read. Are we R-E-A-D, read, or R-E-D, read? As soon as I'd written out Clive Barker's Books of Blood as the title, I then wrote underneath it that little couplet, which I invented just to remind us that as human beings, we are blood-filled books of experience. Hopefully, most of us get to tell the stories inside us without bleeding too much.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing. Congratulations, guys, on the film. And thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome, my love. Take care.
Don't miss Books of Blood, out October 7th. And if you like these interviews, consider subscribing and check out more right over here. See ya.